all of these cases are so different, right? Like from your website to your work to the way your wife works as a professor. There's really so many different things that we can do every day. And I think the conversations that I have with so many folks, they're really just using ChatGPT. And I don't think individuals realize how, first of all, how easy it is to get an agent. I downloaded Codex on Sunday and it took 5 minutes. 5 minutes. And I had built it up into something so much bigger. Yeah, T. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Everyday Data. This is the show where we talk about all things data, analytics, and AI and how they're showing up in our everyday lives. We're your hosts, Patricia and Zac. We are MSBAI graduates from NYU's Stern School of Business, and we are data and pop culture enthusiasts. And today on the show, what we're going to do is talk about AI agents, but more specifically, how Zac is using AI agents to basically boost productivity in work and life. And he's crushing it. He is texting me every day about something cool with his agents. And so I was like, we got to talk about it on the podcast and get other people on board with using agents. If you haven't yet, this is the place to help you get started. But before we do that, we're going to talk about the news because we like to stay aware of what's happening and share it with you. So, Zac, what has been catching your attention in the news lately?
Well, AI, is of course everywhere. So it's going to mean AI rather than just data. And this week, this is the week of April 27th. Had to check the date. But the week of April 27th, we're recording this on the 28th. And today is day 2 of the long-awaited Sam Altman versus Elon Musk trial. So I
Oh,
was refreshing the news all day today. And we're just the start of the trial, so I won't bore everyone with the details, but just in broad strokes, so you're aware of what the trial was about. It's Elon Musk, the world's richest man from Tesla, SpaceX fame, but he is suing Sam Altman and OpenAI because of a difference of opinion on how we've talked about, or you may know yourself as a listener, how OpenAI went from being a nonprofit at its inception when Musk was part of the founding team. So Elon Musk, if you didn't know, yes, he helped found OpenAI. And then as OpenAI grew, they were just like a research lab at the start. This is detailed in the book Empire of AI by Karen Howe. It was a great book. But as the lab grew, established itself as a nonprofit mission driven company that was to do good. And what Musk is alleging is that it was developed and started as a counterweight to Google. That was one of his assertions today, that was like one of the original missions. And later, if you follow the news of OpenAI, Musk sort of left his close ties with OpenAI and Sam Altman over differences of opinions, and OpenAI
drama.
diverged, yes, to be a for-profit with a nonprofit controlling entity. So they have this weird structure where, of course, they need money, and that's also in the news today. There was also news about the CFO, how they're missing their targets right now, but they still have a bunch of capital expenditures. So yeah, they need money. So that's why OpenAI spun off to make money to pay for all these data centers and all this other infrastructure they need, but they still have like a nonprofit controlling board, and that was a bunch of drama. So the counterpoint to this whole suit is that Altman and the team allege that the whole reason why Elon Musk is bringing this up is because he basically feels it's sour grapes, that he didn't have a problem with this until ChatGPT was launched. That the entire early days of OpenAI it was just a research firm developing what, of course, became OpenAI's ChatGPT. But those early days, he was not really cared because they weren't having, the blockbuster success. And only once they started, making money hand over fist with the, of course, revolutionary ChatGPT, did Elon Musk feel that he was being left out of this profit structure. So anyways, that is the trial. It is still ongoing, so probably more to come on the next show. So Patricia, back to you. What are you aware of these past couple weeks?
Also, I feel like this story has been going on forever. Like, I
Yeah.
thought the trial happened by this point because I've been hearing about it for so long. So I can't believe that it's only just started. And yeah, let's stay updated on the story because I think it's going to be really interesting. Great timing for Elon Musk to be like, I want a piece of the pie. And I love whenever you and I end up having similar stories because I just think that like how serendipitous because my story is about OpenAI too. And I guess it makes sense if they need money. Obviously, they're going to keep expanding their products. And they have been planning to expand their products to hardware devices. So OpenAI has been working with Apple's ex design chief, Joni Ive, and they've created a product launch of a bunch of different products that they want to be launching in the next couple of years that are similar to like Google Homes, to Alexa. They have glasses that they want to bring out. And originally they weren't going to bring out a phone, but apparently they just said that they are planning on launching a phone that's going to compete with the iPhone in 2028. And I think that's going to be really interesting. Like an AI hardware iPhone or like a phone is going to be very fascinating to the phone world. It's already very competitive. And so now to see an AI competitor enter that space, I want to be looking at this closely in the next couple of years.
Yeah, so I have like two quick thoughts on that. One is how it ties into what Anthropic and Claude is doing and how they're doubling down on what makes money. So on the one hand,
Mm,
I feel this, yeah, like they're going too many ways at once and talk about this financial troubles like that I was mentioning in the with the CFO. I feel they do need to focus on the core product like Anthropic, but the counterpoint, and when you talk about phone, of course, what comes to mind Apple. I mean, okay, I'm a little
mhm.
bit older than you, but I remember when Apple launched. I mean, Apple wasn't a hardware company, and now they're a hardware company, right? So of course, they had MacBooks and they had, the Apple computer, but iPhone was revolutionary, and no one thought that they would succeed when the iPhone first came out. It was out of left field. So while I'm a little pessimistic because I feel they need to focus on the core product, their AI products. On the other hand, being Silicon Valley, you never know, right? With these hardware things, it could go the way of Apple. Who knows?
Yeah, like I feel like I've been, you kind of read stories, especially since AI has been blowing up, of Google and Apple trying to embed AI, Apple Intelligence, Gemini's in the phones now. But those phones weren't built from an AI mindset up.
Correct.
And so OpenAI wanting to enter the space and now I feel like just rethinking the way that phones are even being built and the usage and the use cases. I'm interested to see how they could potentially disrupt the industry
Exactly. Yeah.
or flop. TBD.
It's always the risk. Yes. It could be a massive failure, but we'll see. I'm excited to
Yeah.
see.
And we'll be here to give our commentary on it. So stick with us. Okay, should we get into our chat for
Let's jump right
today?
into it.
I'm really excited for it because just for those who are listening and watching, Zach and I, we talk a lot about every topic. Obviously, we have a podcast together, but also we've been talking a lot lately about agents because Zach is on top of the agent game. He uses agents to maximize his outputs in several areas of his life. Meanwhile, I do none of that. Like I am not an agent girly. I think I've built it up bigger in my head than it probably needs to be. And I say this to Zach all the time where I'm like, Zach, I don't have a day to sit at home and like figure out agents. And Zach's always like, you don't need any of that. You just need to get started. And so we were chatting about it recently and we were like, you know what? We should have a conversation about it because I always ask you so many questions, Zach, when you're talking to me about how you're using agents. And there are probably so many other people out there who also have questions about how to get started, how to maximize what works, what doesn't work. And so hopefully this episode will inspire those people and myself to stop dilly-dallying and to get on the agent train. So we're all in this together. So Zach, I want to just hear your stories, talk about what is working and what's not working with you. And I know that we were planning on talking about sort of three areas that you've been using agents in. One of them is in your projects, with coding work, and with organization. So why don't we start with projects and why don't you share a little bit about how you're using agents in that space?
Yeah, I'll just preface this by saying also, while I feel I'm an early adopter, I wasn't like an early-est adopter. So we've covered on before OpenClaw, which was like the springboard for that brought agents really into the popular culture, which we talk about, popular OpenClaw, which is built on Claude code, which we all use or are familiar with. We know Claude, but OpenClaw was just a way to interface better with Claude code. And because it got so popular, it's really refined these agents and what's possible by the actual players, by Anthropic itself, by OpenAI. And I was not a early adopter of OpenClaw because at first I didn't see the point. And we've covered on here as the news the horror stories of agents going out of control. That you're giving these OpenClaw, which is more like a life organization, and people giving it access to their bank accounts, their emails, and is deleting databases, canceling things, buying things. So I was a little cautious and I didn't really see the use case. But as Patricia just mentioned, I slowly eased into this, and just as a way to give it a shot, I finally, I guess, reached the tipping point where like, okay, let me just give it a shot, play around. And yeah, my first introduction to this to start off my like agent journey, you could say, was long-standing backlog code projects. A particular, of course, is the personal website. I feel nowadays everyone should have your personal branding website. Maybe you don't, so it's not everyone, but I've had like my name as domain for ages. It's always just been some random template that I find online and I've slowly customized. The old way, of course, doing that was writing code by hand, which is not the hardest thing in the world, but as I'm not a front end web developer, it doesn't come super naturally to me. I can follow tutorials, templates are super easy, you're just modifying, but it just looked so generic and it just felt like, okay, it was there. It was like a resume, but it didn't really feel mine. And I've always had this like to-do list. I've had like in my Apple Notes, we've talked about notes in like goal setting. One of my goals was always like, yes, finish the website, or I had these features to it. And I was like, you know what? This is probably a candidate for the coding agent because it's code. It's not difficult code. It's HTML websites have been around forever. Let me just give it a try. So I started my first coding project with an agent, refreshing my website. And it was like working with ChatGPT, honestly. It was, you're talking to an LLM still, and then the LLM is just executing on what you tell it and building the actual it's hard to say physical, but the actual written files on your computer. So instead of writing or seeing the chat happen in ChatGPT, and you probably already are using agents already because it's embedded in ChatGPT. So anytime you do a web search on ChatGPT or you do ask it a question, sometimes you'll see the thinking, and it's usually going out and browsing the web. That's literally an agent. So you're already probably using an agent without knowing it because you are talking to ChatGPT maybe via the web on the website, and then it's spawning behind the scenes a web browser, doing the search, doing the research, and then bringing that back, in microseconds. Which again, we talked about the infrastructure to run all this is mind-boggling that it can do all this and give you the results in seconds, that it's spawning browsers, doing the research, compiling the research, and spitting back the results to you. So you're already using agents. But what a coding agent does specifically is localizing it, meaning on your computer. So for back to my website example, I had the idea of what I wanted. I have like a general idea, like, oh, I wanted it more to reflect my personality. So I wanted to like to bring in elements of, instead of just being a generic like resume CV, which is the template I had, I always wanted to like personalize it with, like give me some fantasy, sci-fi books I like, some colors I like. So I kind of started chatting with ChatGPT and saying, once I pointed the agent, which is in this case, it was Codex, which is ChatGPT's coding agent. And I also use Claude Code. So I use them like interchangeably, and pointed to a folder on my desktop. And I told it, here is an idea that I have. And again, this is maybe slightly advanced prompting, but we kind of planned it together and then we executed on it. So we developed a PRD, like a product requirements document of this is what the design should invoke. These are like the feeling I want from the website. So as if you were talking to an actual web developer, they would prompt you with questions, and you can ask your LM, say, okay, prompt me like a web developer. Let's decide on the look and feel, what like kind of pages I want. Like I wanted my resume, I want like an about me, but I also wanted to showcase like this podcast, the other YouTube videos I do, books I read. So I wanted to give it these different parameters, and we collaborated on this doc in ChatGPT, and then I had Claude Code write the file. So this is where the agent comes in, where it says, okay, this document that I created with ChatGPT, now execute on it and build the actual files. And Claude Code just it takes the output, the document, and it writes the HTML, all the files, and he created the website. And of course, it was not the first round is always rough, just like anything you create with ChatGPT or any LLM. It's going to be not exactly as you want it, but that's the iterative process where I took that first draft, we tweaked it, we went through 4 or 5 complete revisions. But as you, just like anything, as you work through it, you slowly get better. You understand what was working. You can speak the language better, that, okay, the navigation was better. I like this element, but I want to switch it with this. And we just collaborated together and we iterated in the sense that it did the coding and it stood up the files, and you just open the files and you host them on a website and you're good to go. So it created all the files, all the structure, everything, and through chat. That's the great part, that I didn't write any code. I like literally zero code. Every code piece was structured. It worked. It launched. Claude Code tests it for you, so it like launches a mini browser, so it verifies that things show up, that it looks good. It can't see exactly, of course, all the aesthetics, but then you just iterate and tell it. And yeah, it was one of those things where after a couple rounds, of course, that I had this website, and yeah, the first draft not so great, version 2 better, version 3, version 4, but where it is now, I feel it reflects kind of, and not the original vision, but an evolved vision, because I kind of knew what I wanted once I saw it. So it just allowed me to just start, right? It was one of those things
Yeah.
where I had always meant to do it. So that was the takeaway for me and what got me most excited. And that's what we'll probably talk about next. Where else did it kind of apply this? But it allowed me
Yeah.
to, like a writer's block. One of the best ways, people say to like start an email, you just start writing something. You got to get something on the paper, like get the brain juices flowing. You got to start seeing some sort of action, that just that inertia. Once you start building, once you start writing, then it kind of can snowball and you just get more motivated because you're seeing that immediate progress. You're seeing either words on the page of the email or the book or the journal you're writing, or in this case, the code you're building. You just start seeing the actual results way faster than would before. So that kind of dopamine, addiction of like, wow, you see this happen in front of you. It's great. It is sort of dopamine addiction to start seeing things just get built. And yeah, that just really, it just like got me going. It crossed something off the list that I always meant to do. And very happy with it. Right. So,
Yeah, and honestly, seeing the way that your website was getting developed and seeing the different iterations of it was so interesting, because I think the biggest thing that really stuck out to me in terms of opportunity and sort of convincing me to go the agent route is the amount of iteration and self check that the agent does itself, where it's doing the testing for you to see what works, what's not working. It's checking its code. So you're not really having to do that work. But did you feel at any point that it was going in a direction that you didn't want it to go in? Like, was that something that you struggled with at any point? Because that is something that I'm like, okay, so this agent is just building your website for you, and you're not, all you've done is give it like one document. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like someone could think that, okay, that's not enough. Like, is that actually enough for an agent to just roll with?
yeah, and I think that's like a best practice. And maybe it's more of make sure you're finding the initial vision better. The spending more time on the setup and the other things. And I will say, maybe this is like a roundabout way to answering it, because I know what you said. I created like the version 1 was totally different from what you see now. It was very focused. I wanted the original idea was this whole retro theme, and I wanted like, oh, I wanted like growing up in my day, like I wanted like this vision of the 90s, and I thought it would be like so cool to have this like retro because I'm just feeling older, but I feel like I love the affinity for like retro and things from the 80s and 90s. But then I realized it wasn't that great. So I did a second PRD based on what I learned the first time. So
Mm.
we established what like I had this initial vision of like I wanted like pixel art in the throwback to like GeoCities, like early internet days of like pre MySpace when you had like these early websites. And I thought it'd be so fun. The vision in my head, this is my thinking back then, was man, I wanted to make this cool kind of like retro feeling website just to kind of be different, right? Because I wanted to go maybe against the clean aesthetic that I was before because I was using a template where it was modern web design, which is super minimalist, right? For a reason, because it works on like phones and everything. So there's a point to all this minimalism. But I had this vision in my mind, so I created one. But then, like to your answer, is it went built that, but I wasn't really happy. So after like 1 or 2 days, and this is one of the benefits of agents, that it wasn't that much of a lift to totally blow it up and start over. Whereas before,
Exactly.
like you already put all this work into it, like maybe you just live with it and like, all right, it's fine, whatever. You spend a couple hours, there's definitely still time commitment while it
Days.
builds it. Yeah.
Yeah, like, it took me days to build my shitty website.
Yeah. And then the agent like gets hours, which is still time. I mean, no doubt I spent like way too much time on this, but I feel the end result was worth it in less than days, right? It was hours, but it wasn't days. And yeah, the cost to start over again, while yes, it takes more time, but it was not days. And like I said, I learned a lot. So I learned
Mm,
that second version is now it's back to the little more minimalist design, but still with flair and ideas that carried through. So it wasn't quite so retro-y that I thought I wanted the first time, but then I brought other parts of my personality into it, which is when I went to the more, okay, let me bring elements of like books I like Dune, Lord of the Rings, like
yeah.
let me bring like sci-fi fantasy kind of hints at it, but don't make it overly obvious, which I had it before. It was like a glaringly obvious early 2000s internet version.
And which agent did you use to do this work?
This was all in Claude Code. So I used ChatGPT to plan it and then execute it with Claude. So it was a combo. But we'll talk later that I do use Claude Code or ChatGPT Codex now for my actual like work day to day
Yeah.
work.
Well, speaking of that, like, why don't we go to the next one? And so you started off with like, let me redo my website, and I feel like after that you were so hyped that it was just like, okay, now I'm gonna implement it in this area, in this area, in this area. So why don't you talk about the other areas that you're kind of implementing
Sure.
it in, what you're learning, what you're loving, and yeah,
Yeah, so this is the next example I'll give is maybe more coding specific. So if you're in a technical role, so I'll keep this maybe semi brief, and then we'll talk about maybe some non-technical roles. But yeah, once I saw the power of agents and how much faster it was than me writing code and building websites, and that I do a lot of coding in SQL and Power BI. And the previous way I did this was I still wasn't really coding by hand, but it was more I would describe the problem to like ChatGPT and it would help it massage and build out my existing code. So if you've done coding, there's this you do what's called pseudocode at usually at the start where you just kind of write in
yeah,
English or quasi code, pseudocode, what you want the code to do. So, like, I want to pull this table, pull these rows, merge them on this. I'm talking SQL database stuff, and then transform it. So you just kind of like give it like when this is back in the days of handwriting code, you kind of just give it like yourself a outline, like you're writing like an essay, and then you fill in the details. So, like at a broad level, I want to do XYZ sort of transformations to the data and that's what I would do with ChatGPT. I would kind of give it, here's kind of the structure of my data. Here's what I want. Help me fill in the parameters in ChatGPT, or I also use Gemini or Claude, would go ahead and flesh out the code much faster than I could write it and help me get through some, of course, sticky problems and all the other like benefits of that. But I was more collaborative where I would talk about the problem, write the code, and then paste the code right back into my
That's what I
into
do to this
my
day.
editor. But with agents, I was okay. Why don't I take out the step of right like of copy pasting? So I'll give an example of helping this is a consulting project, helping a friend's a business. They are doing a Databricks, which is a database software implementation where they're transitioning from static PDF reports to they have to self pull their data from Databricks. So they are not coders themselves. That's why I was helping them out. So it is a long looking at databases, trying to find that. So there is a lot of human element to understand the intention. But then once, as I said, I could describe it and I would have Claude Code again write the SQL files and it would write like a 600 line SQL file in seconds, which is because again, this is like collaboratively, I want to do this XYZ. We need to kind of pull these fields, format this way. And it was, yeah, like a long SQL file, 600 lines is a lot of code for SQL to do transformations and doing it all in SQL as opposed to doing like step by step. Like first, like if you think of an Excel file, you'd first maybe pull the data, then you'd maybe truncate the numbers or you'd round it up. There's these other steps and you can do it all in SQL. It takes a while and the code gets longer. And yeah, so I would have Claude write the code and then I would execute. So this is what the difference here as from like a safety standpoint is that we're still collaboratively doing it, but I'm not delving into the open Claude territory of having it like execute against the database. Because this is client data, I don't want it to run rampant and give it the keys to the kingdom and let it pull the data directly. So I still authenticate. It's just writing those queries and helping me test it. So, and before you maybe seen it yourself, Trisha, when you write code, you sometimes have to, describe like you have this, okay, a 600 line file and you're trying to put, where do I put this one fix in? But when you can give your agent access to the actual file, it can read the file and do the code insertion at the exact point, make sure everything is formatted correctly. And it can catch other things that you might have seen originally because it can scan the entire file structure to understand all the entire context to your code. So it just gives it more context and it allows it to work much more efficiently because while you might be trying to fix like one piece of the code, it can now read the entire file and make the edits directly. And it's again,
I
very
feel like that's
much more
kind of what
efficient. I
you
was able
hear
to do
about.
stuff.
Sorry, sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt you, but I feel like that's kind of what you hear about with agents too, is that like, you hear these stories of them finding like let's say the prompt is one thing, they end up coming up with these are all the other things that I found as well, right?
Yeah. Because, yeah, before when I was in the before days, like literally like a month ago, 2 months ago, yeah, you would, okay, the code is failing at like these certain lines, but maybe, fixing one thing breaks something else downstream. But when it has the full context, and again, it's LM, so it's been trained on all this coding data, so it knows the general patterns. And this things I'm not doing, they're just pulling data. This is not like building the next Google. This is not like I say like 600 lines of code. Well, it's a lot of different things. This is not outside the realm of possibility that a normal quote unquote software developer is doing. This is like just your standard pull these rows, transform this way to fit a report. It's not like the end of the world, but it is still a lot of work. So for someone who's not, just doing SQL day in and day out, and it just makes it faster. So it's one of those things. Yes, it just speeds up the process. You could write it by hand, but it's just more efficient. And that's my personal like argument for or against coding with LMs is that while yes, you could, for example, do longhand division, why would you not use a calculator? You could write code by hand, but why would you not have at least the LM start the code? So yes, you're verifying it, you're scanning it, making sure it's right, you're verifying the output, but in the same way, and so even in programming standards, like when I did my bachelor's of computer science, we had to learn like lower level languages like C sharp, C plus, not C sharp, C plus plus, which is more like we had to do like even a class on assembly, which is like ones and zeros and you're managing memory. But nowadays we write in Python, which is like an abstraction, like one layer higher. And Python like handles memory management, like junk cleanup. It does all these things behind the scenes so that you can write your code easier. And to me, like agentic coding is just kind of the next abstraction on top of that, where we don't think twice about having to write ones and zeros because again, at the base level, a computer is just ones and zeros. That's transistors at
Yeah.
the very way down the stack. But we've slowly abstracted to like to Java or to C++, then to Java, then to Python. And now we're just doing agentic coding, which is to me, yeah, just translating human speech into code and into the next layer, next level. So I don't think it's you shouldn't be fighting it.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to what you were saying as well, there's sort of two sets of people that are also using agents and therefore are probably approaching it with different mindsets, and that's okay. You know what I mean? Like you are going to have those coders who might be using it for efficiency, but because they understand code and coding, they're still checking the work,
Yeah.
they're still reviewing it. And I think it is important from that perspective to understand code still at a baseline. Like I know that there's this argument that says, well, doing this work, you're just getting like dumber because you're not writing the code yourself, you're not practicing the code, and that's very important. And I think that's very important, yes, but I think that that argument detracts from the fact that we are also now actually creating a self-service model where regular people who don't necessarily have those skills, haven't had time, the background to learn coding are actually now facing less barriers to pull their own data, to make sense of data. And then, you know, you kind of get the opportunity to, instead of being so focused on the technical side, to be a little bit more strategic with, okay, like how do we actually manage and tag data? How do we put together useful data sets? How do we start collecting useful data? And then how do we use it strategically? And, I think that there's just two sides to it. And I think both are equally positive and are moving in the right direction.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. Yeah, there's two sides to that, and that's the argument all the time, right? Is that the one hand you're making it lazy, but the other hand you're democratizing, right? You're giving access to tools, you're lowering the bar, but the people that are embedded in this, so we're at this real like paradigm shift moment, right? That we're at the change of technology, so it's ruffling
Yeah.
feathers. I mean, yeah,
Who's to say? And as always, and I think this is something that another theme that comes up with us often, it's like we just have to work together. It's not about one way being right or the other way being wrong. I think it's about working together to make sure that those who are, those technical purists are ensuring quality and standards, and those who are not necessarily as technical are able to like innovate and come up with interesting things and have a bit of self-service and make things a little bit more efficient. And I think that's great. And so when we come together, great things happen. And so I think that's something that we can really promote. And it's great to see all the ways that you're using agents. I don't know if did you have any other examples that you wanted to talk about
yeah.
before we wrap up?
So I'll do one more example, and this is the non-coding. So not saving the best for last, but this is when I've helped kind of my wife do this, and I'll talk about how we talk about productivity. So this is how I use AI for productivity, and the best way to learn this. And if you're listening to this and you think, oh, I want to do more of this, look up Claude Cowork, which is it's similar to agents, but it's basically instead of writing files, it's managing stuff on your computer. But I use it in the code version of it, so actually writing files. And why I help my wife with this, because she was working with Claude, and token management has become a big thing. So as we were talking about at the top of the hour on this topic, tokens are every letter you type is a cost because that is being computed by the LM to process. So it's becoming, as we were talking about all the context, writing these 600 lines of code, that's a lot of information that the LLM has to process. And the new thing in agents is optimizing that. So not feeding it. We talked about, writing this PRD, but the best way is to be as most efficient as possible. So the two parts of this is first how I did. So what I'm doing with agents as well, we talked about for project management, is if you've heard of Google Notebook, which is a RAG system, a retrieval augmented generation, where you provide like a source file and a source of truth, and then the agent, instead of drawing on all its knowledge or searching the web, it references specific documents. So if you feed it like a PDF, like a court case, it knows, okay, don't generate text out of all your knowledge, only refer to the PDF court case that I uploaded and just give me results from that. So using that kind of same framework of I only want to give a certain context is how I create like a productivity tracker using coding agents. So I use Codex for this too, where I have the LLM coding agent, so Codex, I have it write down things it learned. So instead of all your history being stuck in multiple chats in ChatGPT, the concept is just tell the agent, again, because this is agents, to write the files to your local computer in a drive. So anytime you work with ChatGPT, you co-work with it to, oh, I created this great marketing campaign, right? So you ask the ChatGPT, okay, take what we just talked about in this chat about this marketing campaign and create a file with our takeaways. Because the next time you start a chat, like I want to reference like what we learned and what the AI quote unquote learned that are my preferences. So we know from this chat that like the website even like, oh, I like certain colors, or this is most like this works in a marketing context. Like our company only uses this certain branding, these standards. So instead of starting from zero every time and okay, here's the brand guidelines. So you're kind of creating, that's why they reference to like a notebook LM, you're creating documents and guiding like guiding documents, like text files, not document, but text files that are in a repository, like in your iCloud drive, your Dropbox. And that way the agent, because it has access to your local computer, can go in there. And in my case, I track like progress on in progress projects at work. So I work on multiple dashboards, but I don't work on one like totally completion. There's always something else to do. So I have ChatGPT keep track of it. So I said, create a markdown file, which is basically a text file for every single dashboard that we work on, or every time we start a new dashboard, create a status document that shows what's in progress and what I know is a to do someday next time I get around to it. Like, oh, I'd love to you add a new field, create a new report, fix these filters. There's always something you can work on, like whether it's a website or a dashboard. But I just write it down, quote unquote, by creating files. And then next time I get around to it, I have the agents scan this repository, this folder that it has access to, and it can quickly come up to speed of where are we in this document. I don't have to go through my own notes. So I let, again, offloading offload my thought, but I let ChatGPT keep track of where we are so it's not in my brain. So it's similar to journaling, right? It's basically
Mhm.
writing a static journal of instead of you track instead of keeping things in your head, right? You're just writing it down. You're writing task lists. It can be your planner. This can be your Notion. This can be your Obsidian, but it's just moving it offline. So it's out of your
Mhm.
head. Like again, the saying, your head is for having thoughts, not holding thoughts, right? Like you want to get the ideas out of your brain. So to me, this is a way to kind of quasi quote unquote journal and at least get the ideas, these tasks, these to-dos into files. But instead of me writing it, I'm just having the agent write it. And where this, to wrap this up, where this comes like for my wife, who is a non-technical person, or she's pretty technical with using agents, but she's not like a coder. So she's doing like research, PhD level research, writing papers. But the problem she was having was running into token limitations on Claude. Like you hit the limit because she would feed these documents and she didn't want to start notebook LMs for everything because there's multiple projects in coordination. There's multiple data sources. There's different things. So I set up like an agent workflow for her to basically have a local notebook where she has folders that keep track of things. And then instead of providing, uploading the documents, the Word documents, the rubrics, these coding books to every new chat, she can do it agentically and have the agent, okay, read this document in as is needed instead of always keeping it into the memory, which if you've ever used ChatGPT for like a super long session, it starts forgetting where it was. And that's because as the chat gets longer, basically what ChatGPT or Claude is doing, it's summarizing itself. So every time it's like its buffer window fills up, it summarized itself, and you'll see in the bottom it says like, "Oh, compacting context." It's basically taking everything we talked about and summarizing it. So while it gets, of course, the main idea, it doesn't know the details. So by giving an agent like access to source documents that are always there, you can just tell the agent to reread the file. So it resets its context because it reads the file in every time it needs it, as opposed to always keeping it in memory and using a large part of that buffer just to hold the Word document that it might not need that exact moment. So it's kind of doing a memory token management is what I set for her so that she can just call things or, just tell the agent to just read the file as needed based on the project instead of what she used to have, like one long super chat that was scrolling page after page every time she started a new project.
Wow. So, literally, just in this conversation, right? Like, you have shared agents as your website developer, an agent as your extreme coder, right? Like, literally working with data lakes and like supporting data migration, almost like a consultant,
Yeah.
and as a productivity assistant to the max. And
Yeah.
so just within these 3 different cases, and there's obviously so many more, but I love how it's just like bringing to life, like, all of these cases are so different, right? Like from your
Mhm.
website to your work to the way your wife works as a professor. There's really so many different things that we can do every day. And I think the conversations that I have with so many folks, they're really just using ChatGPT. And I don't think individuals realize how, first of all, how easy it is to get an agent. I downloaded Codex on Sunday and it took 5 minutes. 5 minutes. And I had built it up into something so much bigger. Yeah, T.
Yeah.
I had built it into something so big, and it was like, it took me 5 minutes to download Codex. And then I went over to ChatGPT and I started sharing some of the productivity issues that I'm having, other issues that I'm having, some of the things that I want to do with my website and update that. And I had a plan within 10 minutes of how to move forward. And so it's literally as simple as that. And I think you've really brought to life how much of an impact something so simple can be. Like you said, it's just about starting. And so hopefully this conversation is going to be a good inspiration for folks to get started. You've really inspired me to get started on it. And so maybe in a couple weeks, I can give a bit of an update on how I'm doing with my agentic workflows. But this has been great. Like, thank you so much for sharing. And, if for those of you who are watching, listening, how are you using agents? If you have, if you're not using agents, what is holding you back? Did we help you change your mind? Let us know. We'd love to know.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, just to reiterate what you said, what I was saying, there's so many ways you can use agents. So just start. Right? I applaud you. Do the jazz fingers, whatever. Yes, you started. You finally gave it a shot. It's not as scary, but start small and just see where it goes. Just experiment. That's the best way to learn any new technology, right? It just you got to play with it, right, and learn it.
Yeah, and this is what I say, listen, if I can do it, anyone can do it. So, with that, we hope you go and start using some agents, get creative, and let us know how it goes. Until next time, bye.
Bye.